John Hartson was known as a hard man of football. He signed for Luton Town aged 16 and went on to become a goal machine for 8 different clubs and his country, Wales, being managed by and playing alongside some of the biggest names in football. Let's go back to the beginning. Tell us about your upbringing and your family.
Well, I had a brilliant upbringing in Swansea, one of 4 children, my brother and my 2 sisters. We lived in a council house all my life, basically running around the streets and youth club and play scheme and the school holidays and all this stuff. Really, really happy upbringing. My mum and dad never ever laid a finger on us physically or you know, my dad was the boss of the house, he was the breadwinner. But saying that, my mum worked in the psychiatric hospital, which is a really difficult job, you know, dealing with people that have been taken off the streets because they're psychotic and they need 24-hour care. So my mum had a really difficult, and she worked nights. But my mum and dad, fantastic. They did everything for us, you know, to try and make sure that, you know, we had a holiday every summer. My dad used to have this old van, and he had a roof rack, and we'd all jump in the back of the van, and he'd put the cases on the roof rack, and we'd go down to, say, Tenby in West Wales, and we'd go and stay in a caravan because we never went abroad and places like this. But I have to say my upbringing was brilliant, and my parents couldn't have been any nicer to us. And
supportive as well. They encouraged you into football, particularly your dad. And it was 16 years old when you signed for Luton Town. So your mum and dad drive you down to Luton and drop you off. What's it like as a footballer in that situation? Is it exciting or scary?
Well, it was a great opportunity for me because I'd had these dreams as a young boy growing up in Swansea to hopefully get an opportunity to go to a football club at 16 to start what you'd call an apprenticeship or a scholarship or a YTS scheme. And I got an opportunity at Luton, and then I went up there at 16, lived with a family, and at 17 I'd made an immediate impact on the football club, and I got into the first team very young. But Luton was a great upbringing. It was old school in terms of we had to clean the stands and we had to clean the players' boots. We all got a professional that we had. Every single one of the youth team players had to personally get his kit out for him, make sure his boots were shining for everyday training. The youth team coach used to go around the top of the dressing room, the hooks, and just run his finger for dust and things like that. I always remember that vaguely. My youth team coach, Terry Wesley, who was always great for me. Terry's working now at West Ham with the under-21s, I believe. But Luton was great. Luton was just a really special place because it was where it all started. And David Pleat then, of course, gave me my debut at 19.
And it wasn't long before the big clubs were looking at you, and you moved to Arsenal, most expensive teenager in British history, 2.5 million. George Graham's Arsenal, and what a team you joined.
It was a great team. It was almost, well, it was the England back four. It was David Seaman, Dixon, Adams, Keown, Boldy, Winterburn, John Jensen, Ray Parlour, Merson, Bergkamp, Wright, Smith, Campbell, Selly. Great club. And they were fantastic with me. I was only 19. I was walking in that dressing room, and I remember George Graham said to me on the Friday I signed, he took me upstairs, we come through the marble halls, Highbury, the marble floors, and went upstairs into Ken Fryer's office. And George is there, and he said, John, he said, Kevin Campbell's got injured this morning. Alan Smith is struggling with his knee. He said, if you sign for me today, son, he said, you'll play out there on Highbury. There was sort of glass in the office, and you could look in onto Highbury. He said, if you sign for me today, he says, you'll play out there tomorrow with the current England centre-forward, who, of course, was Ian Wright. So I basically said, right, where's the contract, you know? It wasn't really about money. I never even thought about money back then. I was 19. I was going to make money during my career. And I signed, and I made my debut on that Saturday. We played Everton, playing against my big mate, Neville Southall, who was in goal for Everton. Duncan Ferguson got sent off for Everton, and Ian Wright scored the goal for us, and we drew the game 1-1. So that was me made my debut on the Saturday, quickly pushed into the team, got to quickly know the lads. Tony Adams was brilliant captain, a real man amongst men. Everybody loved Tony. And Righty, and then Bergkamp joined then the following season. So Arsenal was just great memories. We got to the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup final and managed to get a goal, the famous goal, Naeem from the halfway line, beat the world's #1 goalkeeper at the time, David Seaman. So that was a bit of a shame, but Arsenal was great memories.
And George Graham wasn't there too long after you signed. He left under quite controversial circumstances and Bruce Rioch took over. What was your relationship like with him?
Not great with Bruce. I don't know why, but we just didn't quite get on as well as we should have, really, manager and player. I was very young. I was very boisterous. I played with Bruce's son, Greg, in the Luton youth team. So I knew Bruce before he came to Arsenal. I used to go down to his house in Harpenden with his son, Greg, and Bruce's wife, Greg's mum, used to make us food and things like that. And I don't know whether Greg got, I think he went on to Wigan, and he might, don't think he had a too successful career. Not being disrespectful to Greg, I love Greg Rioch, he's a good lad. But maybe it was because maybe Bruce, I was at Arsenal, and Greg maybe was a little bit further down the ladder. And I just felt he was a bit personal, some of the stuff that he used to do to me and say to me. Maybe looking back, you know, maybe I was a little bit young, a bit paranoid, and maybe I should have done things a little bit better. But we didn't see eye to eye. We never quite got on. So the day that Bruce was sacked, it was like I was really overjoyed, without sounding disrespectful or nasty. I just felt I could make a fresh start now under a manager that I could go and impress the new manager. And from Bruce Rioch, it was Arsène Wenger, and I had a brilliant relationship with Arsène Wenger. Me and Righty played up top, and Dennis played in the hall several times. He never wanted me to leave Arsenal. Arsène Wenger, there was a new contract on the table there that I only needed to go and see David Dean, and it was ready there, a new contract at Arsenal for me to sign. But I had Harry Redknapp and West Ham on the phone. They wanted to sign me at 21, and I eventually ended up going to West Ham.
Just going back to Arsène Wenger though, he came in with some quite new ways that have probably been rolled out more across the board now. But what did you make of them at the time? And what sort of things did he do that might have surprised you?
Well, he just basically, Arsène Wenger, the training became more structured. He did everything with a watch. We would do 6 or 7 laps of the training ground every morning before we started training, just to get the lactic acid out of your body and your legs. Great coach, would take players 1v1, clearly very intelligent. I never heard him swear once, a complete gentleman. And the players loved him. The players absolutely loved him. The senior players as well. And I think they will now say to you themselves that Arsène Wenger added 2 or 3 years on top of their careers, because they really tuned into the diet, the foods that we were getting, the stretching after training every day. We'd go into a room and Arsène Wenger would stand in the middle. We would form a big circle, and he'd go through all the stretches, and the lads tuned in to the philosophy that what Arsène wanted. And what was a bit of a shame really was I left Arsenal. It wasn't a shame, because I'm happy I went to West Ham, because I had a good time there, and I worked with some great players, and obviously Harry Redknapp has become a great friend of mine over the years, Harry, who signed me. But I left Arsenal in '97, and they won the double in '98. So if I'd stayed and been a bit more patient, because it was Righty and Dennis that was keeping me out, Dennis Bergkamp, obviously, and Ian Wright, 2 of the greatest at the time, I might have been sitting here with a double winners medal now, and I'd have played with the great Henry and Petit, and Vieira was there, of course. I forgot to say Patrick then was in the squad. So it was one of them things, you know, I can't do nothing about it now, but maybe if I know now what I might have known at 21, I may well have stayed at Arsenal for a few more years.
But Harry Redknapp came along and he offered you first team football every week, guaranteed.
Yeah.
You seem to be a player that kind of thrives on confidence in you.
I'm a confidence person. I think most of us are. If I walk into a room, even now, I'll go and sit at the back. I won't necessarily sit at the front. You know, I think we all thrive on a bit of confidence. We all work better when we're confident. I've done shows for television companies and I'm not too comfortable with the presenter and I'm not as confident and I don't come across as well. And then I go to another show, me and the presenter, we're good friends. He asks me the right things. He brings me in at the right times and I'm flying and I come across great and I'm relaxed and I can deal with the cameras and things like this. So I think we all thrive a little bit on confidence. I was quite shy, believe it or not. Whenever the manager dug me out in the dressing room, I'd go bright red and I'd go a little bit embarrassed. But in time, obviously, I picked up a lot more confidence as the years have gone by with some of the clubs I'd played for and everything else that you just have to get on with your life. And sometimes you've got to be confident for your kids, you know. But I struggled with confidence initially, early on. But then Harry gave me the confidence to go and lead the line at West Ham, be the main player, built his team around me, and I had great success there, especially that first season with 24 goals, which was my best in the Premier League.
You rewarded him with lots of goals, and you guys had a great relationship. Of course, he's now the king of the jungle.
That's right.
Have you spoken to him about it?
I haven't spoken to him. I probably couldn't get hold of him. He's probably really busy. I've heard he's doing a new book and everything, but good luck to him. You know, he's a great guy.
Did you watch it?
I watched snippets of it, yeah. My wife's a big fan. She watches it. She tapes it and everything. So I was delighted for him because he showed the public that that softer side to him, and I think everybody's fallen in love with him since the jungle. But no, he was great when he signed me back then. A long time ago now. Seems like a long time ago. He gave me the confidence, as I said, and he's a character. We used to go to Walthamstow Dogs together on a Thursday night. Me and Harry Redknapp, my manager. Harry would have, we'd both have a little bit of a steak. I'd have a glass of Coke. He'd have a glass of wine, and we liked a little bet back then. That's common knowledge. But it was, that's the type of relationship we had. Players you wouldn't see Pep Guardiola go into the Manchester dog track with Raheem Sterling, would you?
Definitely not, no. Unfortunately.
But back then, there was no cameras, there was none of this social media, all this sort of stuff. And Harry could meet me, in a hotel, and we'd go to the dogs and we'd come home and nobody would know about it apart from the people that were there. So that was great.
It was around that time that you also became a bit of a man to watch for the tabloids. You got yourself involved in a few incidents, including a late night incident in a bar with your uncle.
I know.
Firmly leading you astray. What did Harry say, though, about that?
Well, he wasn't too happy about it. And I just think, going through a career, some things I regret, but I think a lot of it as well shapes you for what you are, I think. I'm now 43. I think the one good thing about getting older is that you get a bit wiser. You make better decisions, you keep better company, you tend to leave at the right time, and you don't go to certain places that potentially, can be a bit of a nightmare, whereas 10, 15 years ago, you're first in there, you're last out. I grew up on a council estate with a group of guys that like to have a drink and go out and enjoy themselves. And for a long time, I remained one of the boys. And I did things that they did, although I was a professional footballer. But knowing what I know now, as you say, a bit more mature, a bit more grown up. But at that particular time, you make mistakes. You do make mistakes along the way. And I made a few. But, over the piece, over the career, there's not a lot of things I would regret.
Stole a hanging basket, got you in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, I know, but there's 30 hanging baskets that'll be stolen this weekend, and it won't get a mention because it's John Hartson, because I'm in Swansea. Let's get him in. Let's make a headline of this one. Probably
the worst of it, and I would assume one of your biggest regrets was the incident with Eyal Berkovic on the training grounds.
That was.
He made it to the press.
That was a really a regrettable incident because although I was physical, I was quite aggressive. I enjoyed that physical side of the game. It was wrong to lash out and do what I did to Eyal. Although he hit me first, if you look at the video, he threw a punch at me, and then I reacted in the wrong way. It was on camera. Somebody had filmed it. Somebody then went and put it out there. It went viral, and I had a lot of bad publicity. And you know, I felt for my family because they were not used to that. You know, there was press knocking my parents' door in Swansea and things like this. But it was a lesson, and as I said, I've not got that many regrets, but that was an incident that I wish hadn't happened. And I always felt that slightly went before me then. I was 21. It was like more than half my lifetime ago. I'm 43 now. And people, you know, my 30-odd goals in 60-odd games for West Ham, and I played my part in keeping them up. People tend to not mention the good things, and people like to sort of revel in the misdemeanors. For Roy Keane, all Roy's magnificent career, people like to talk about when he walked away from Ireland and when he ended a player's career. It's like, talk about the good things. And I've always had to answer them questions because I think people generally like to know about, you know, the stuff that went wrong. Do you know what I mean? But as I said, I've held my hands up. I take full responsibility for that incident, and it's one that I did regret and look back and think I wish it never happened.
A moment of madness.
Yes, absolutely.
Possibly was a factor in you leaving West Ham. You went to Wimbledon next, where I'd imagine the antics on the training ground were much more sedate.
Well, they were, but what happens on the training ground stays on the training ground, as you know. But there was a great bunch of lads. Obviously, I'd missed the crazy gang era in terms of Dennis Wise and Vinnie Jones and Fash and Dave Besant, all the guys that were there at the time. But we still had some great characters. We had Marcus Gale, we had Robbie Earle, who was brilliant, Ben Thatcher, Andy Roberts, Alan Kimball, Kenny Cunningham, Neil Sullivan, Carl Court. Great lads, really, really. Neil Ardley, of course, who's just moved out of his post as a Wimbledon manager, gone up to Notts County. Neil was a great lad, good player. But we had great fun. Joe Collier paid an awful lot of money for me, £7.5 million, and Sam Haman, which almost shook the football world at the time. It was so much money. And you look back now, you know, that was 1999. And what's that? It's like 20 years ago. That's 85 million now in today's market, yeah. You know, if you think of the years. So I had a few injuries at Wimbledon.
Tough time there. A
little bit of a tough time there, yeah. And my little girl was born in Hatfield. I was living in Brooklands Park. I was driving right the way around the M25 to go training every day. And but nothing but good times again, really. Had a few injury problems. We got relegated. I commented again on that relegation, which I should have kept my big mouth shut, really. Egil Olsen came to the club, who was an absolute gentleman. He really, really was. He had a certain style of playing. He loved a big centre forward, so that suited my style. They got the ball from front to back really quickly. Myself, Marcus Gale and Carl Court were the three up front, 6'3", you know, big guys. So Wimbledon was an experience, but again, no regrets about joining Wimbledon. I went as well for Joe Kinnear, Mick Arthur, who was my hero. He was a coach. So no regrets about going to Wimbledon. It
was when you came to leave Wimbledon that problems started occurring in your career, problems that you didn't expect at the time. And on the pitch, obviously, it was difficult. I think 4 clubs you were going to sign for that turned you down because you failed in medical when you thought you had no problems. And off the pitch, that was a really hard time for you.
It was, because I'm thinking, there's nothing wrong with my knee here. I'm doing all the training, I'm doing all the drills. That's expected of me in training. But whenever you scanned my knee, something showed up that that made put the clubs off signing me, because they thought this knee ain't gonna last. You know, it's something there. Medically, it didn't stand up to what was the criteria, what they were looking for. And I failed a big medical at Spurs for £7 million. So that would have meant I was going Arsenal, West Ham, Wimbledon, Spurs. Failed that medical, Dr. King, David Pleat, Chief Executive, George Graham, Manager, Alan Sugar, Chairman. Spent the day having a medical, failed that one. I would gladly have signed for Spurs, wouldn't have bothered me about playing for other London clubs. It would have been a proud moment for me. Then I went to Rangers, Glasgow Rangers, which again, the way things have worked out, my 5 years, my 110 goals for Celtic, they're big rivals. That was probably, looking back, one of the best things that have happened to me. But at the time, it really hurt to fail the medical, because if I hadn't have failed that medical, I wouldn't have had the chance to sign for Celtic and had the career that I had and the success I had playing for Celtic. Charlton, Alan Kirbishley, spent the day with Alan Kirbishley, failed that medical, and then I failed the medical initially at Coventry, and then Coventry then did a deal with Wimbledon that they pay Wimbledon as I play, and I had a brilliant 6 months for Coventry, proved my fitness, and then in the summer we went down at Coventry, got relegated. In that summer I went to Celtic and joined Martin O'Neill for £6 million, which was great. And
you were literally hero worshipped at Celtic, weren't you? Was the feeling mutual?
Yeah, I love the club. It's a special club. The fans were unbelievable. When I was ill, they were brilliant. When I was playing there, I had 5 great years. Met my wife Sarah while I was in Glasgow, and it's an unbelievable club. The volume, the size of the fan base worldwide. We had a great team. Got to the UEFA Cup final in 2003. I think I won 7 trophies. I won 3 league trophies, individual honours for goals, and I thoroughly enjoyed my 5 years with Celtic Football Club, and you know, it's just a great place to play your football.